In this video, I'll be explaining a variation against the Caro-Kann defense, which allows white to get a stable positional advantage and limit a lot of black's counterplay. After e4, c6, d4, and d5, we get into the Caro-Kann, and I think white should play e5 here, gaining space in the center. Of course, this is the advanced variation, and black has two moves, c5, um, which is the less likely of the two, and I'll cover in a separate video, and his main move, bishop f5, which is the subject of today's video. And here, I think white has a really good option in knight d2, and the point is we're going to play knight b3 next, and discourage black from playing c5, which is usually his, like, liberating break in these, uh, typical like advanced variation positions. And black black's only option is e6 here. Like something like c5 won't work because takes e6 check knight d7 and like after b4 we're holding on to the pawn. So e6 is his only move here, and we play knight b3 as planned, stopping black from playing c5. Um, if he tries to play it now, after takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and queen a5 check, c3 takes, and bishop e3. Black doesn't lose material, but we get a position that's just more pleasant because after queen c7, f4, knight e7, and just some regular moves, we get this space advantage in the center together with the bishop pair, and black isn't like doesn't have any really advantages here. And a6 is another move black can play, and one of the points of a6 is that if we play knight f3, now after c5 takes, bishop takes, queen c5, queen a5, c3, and takes. After this whole sequence, uh, we already placed our knight on f3, which is blocking us from playing f4, and we can try to play knight d4 here, but I think maybe it's simpler to start with bishop e2 after a6, and after this step we'll get into the same position as here with the immediate c5. And after bishop a6, bishop b2, instead of c5, if knight d7 is played, this transposes to another line, which I'll speak about also in this video. But after knight b3, knight d7's the main move, and here after knight f3, black has many moves. c5 is just trying to break out and uh, get counterplay immediately, but white is like well equipped to handle that. And after take, um, black can try knight takes c5, but after bishop g5, queen c7, and c4, white is white has a lot of activity, and it's gonna be hard for black to deal with all the annoying threats, and white is already better here. So that's why bishop takes c5 is more common. But now after takes, and say these moves, uh, white has the bishop pair and a space advantage in the center, and he's the only one who can really claim an advantage. So c5 isn't played too much, but a6 is also here, and the point is after bishop e2, uh, now c5 works better here because there's in many forcing variations the b5 square is protected from any check or anything. And after takes, uh, If knight takes c5, knight d4, bishop g6, and castles, white is has the space advantage in the center. Black still has to develop, and so white is a little better here. And after bishop takes c5, takes knight d4, knight e7, castles, bishop e3, rook c8, and c3, we get like a very similar scenario to before, where white is has the bishop pair and this space advantage in the center because of the pawn on e5. And I think uh, that's one of the benefits of this line. Uh, as far as I've seen, like black or white can get these sorts of positions where, like the same sorts of positions where he just has the space advantage and very like similar ideas in all the positions, which makes it really easy to play for him. So h6 is also a move. After bishop e2, knight e7, and a4, um, white can castle, play knight e1, knight d3, queen c7 there, and after bishop e2, c5 takes, queen takes c3, knight e7, castles, rook e1, queen c7, and bishop f4. Once again, we get a similar scenario, bishop pair, and the space advantage. Instead of c5, black can try f6, and after bishop f4 takes c5, knight h4, and knight h4, we can take the bishop on uh, f5, and these pawns aren't really going anywhere, because if he ever advances with c4, the d4 square is going to be a huge weakness, and if he ever advances with d4, um, these pawns are just going to be loose, and his light squares are going to be weaken a lot, even especially c4. So here, instead of queen c7, bishop g6 is another sideline black can try. After bishop e2, um, black can play knight e7 and put a knight on f5, and we'll play a4, a5, and c3 and get this like uh, get a nice space advantage. And once again, like I've already said this a few times, but like white is the only person who's has any advantages here. Black is like just a little bit worse always in these sorts of positions. Knight h6 here, white can castle and allow knight f5 or try to take on h6 and make like claim these double pawns are bad. Both I think are fine for white. But after knight f3, the main move is knight e7, and after bishop e2, once again, uh, black has a lot of options here. I don't think there's much like use going into the too deep in each one because they all lead to similar positions. But let's say after h6, white can castle. Um, after bishop g6, castles, knight f5, a4, like bishop e7, and then let's say we can play g4 here, knight h6 and h3, and we're just gonna lock away the knight after castles. Like this knight is gonna have a really tough time coming out. So that's an interesting idea to keep in mind where we attack the knight on f5 and then just lock it out of the game. Instead of bishop g6 here, if bishop g4, castles, knight f5, h3, takes, and g6, white once again just has space advantage and a more pleasant position. Knight g6 is there, but castles h5, bishop e3, and then we can reroute our knight to d3, which is a really common thing to do in this position because it helps control c5 and moves out of the way of the f-pawn, which we may want to advance later. So knight e1, h4, and knight d3. we get a typical scenario. Uh, C5 instead um, is a little better for white still as always. After knight takes, pawn takes. Of course, probably e takes here is fine too. Um, we'll end up in we should end up in the same thing after queen a5 check. C3, queen takes, and knight d4. Um, we get a once again just space advantage bishop pair. If after knight takes and d takes, knight c6, bishop e3. Um, and then black takes our knight on f3 to get the pawn on e5. We get um, a nice position because um, the pawn on c5 is annoying, but it's not really weak at all. Because if we really need to, we can support it with c3 or a3 followed by b4, and black still has to develop, so white has a pretty uh, nice advantage here. But like, let's say a6, castles, knight c8, a4, bishop e7, a5, castles, and bishop e3. It's the same scenario with the space advantage, and the fact that like all the four minor pieces are on the board, it makes black really cramped. And this like a4, a5 idea is a typical one to just gain space on the queen side. Queen c7, castles, h6, bishop g2, g5, like a4, a5, knight e1, c5, takes. Black can take on c5, but then that allows bishop e5 check, knight c6, bishop e3, queen e7, and knight f3. And then we're getting a knight to d4, and black's king is still in the center, and it's a little uncomfortable for him. If bishop g7, bishop e5 check, king f8, f4 takes, knight d3 takes, bishop e5, queen h5, and knight c6. White still has uh, an advantage because the king on f8 is really misplaced. Those are just like these positions aren't too forcing, so black can try any of those. But I think um, white's typical plans and moves get him good positions. Knight c8 is the main move here, but not by a big margin. Yeah, it's the main move, but it's only played like 1/3 of the time. After castles, bishop b7. If black plays knight to b6, a4, bishop b7, knight e1, a5, and bishop d3, uh, let's say after takes, we get the knight to d3, and then we completely shut down c5, and we can advance our pawns on the king side, and just enjoy the space advantage. After bishop e7, knight e1, and castles, um, we can get bishop d3 takes, knight takes, a5, queen g4, just threatening bishop h6, and after rook e8, a4, we get another like typical position, and white has a moderate advantage here. Instead of castles, bishop g6 is there for black, but we can play knight d3, and let's say knight b6, a4, knight c4, and a5. Once again, just a regular scenario in this line where black is cramped in because of our space advantage. If instead bishop g6, knight d3, and castles, knight f4, c5, c3, knight b6, takes, and g3, uh, we can expand on the king side and just make like very slow improving moves. I think probably depending on the scenario. Either one of these is fine, and we can slowly improve our pieces. Um, Whereas like black, it's hard for him to do much on the queen side without making a concession. Like he can open the c file, but he won't really have much because we can just cover the entry points. But after knight d3, queen c7, knight f4, c5, c3, knight b6, takes, knight d2, we got a similar scenario, and um, yeah, it's once again just a regular like space scenario where the space advantage for white. Here, after knight e1 c5, we can play g4, bishop g6, and f4. Uh, and we're planning to play f5 here, so black needs to react because that would trap his bishop. So if he goes bishop e4, um, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop e3 takes, castles, and bishop d3. Uh, we have a space advantage here, and our pawns are already advanced, so we have good prospects here. If queen b6 instead, um, let's see, f5 won't work here, probably because takes, okay, bishop f5, and after rook f5, there's the fork on g6, which is actually pretty deep, but uh, that's why I guess queen b6 is still a move here. And after c3, bishop e4, a4, a5, bishop b3, castles, and rook c1. Uh, we get a, once again, standard scenario. Space advantage, and here our pawns are already really advanced, and we have good chances. So knight b6 there too, but after a4, a5, bishop d3 takes, knight d3, knight c4, and g3. Um, White is doing once again well here, because with the open h file, it's not so clear if black really wants a castle. But if he doesn't castle, his king's gonna be stuck in the center forever. And yeah, that's why white is doing good here. So that's basically all the lines you need to know. And like you can tell, um, like all the ideas are very similar throughout all of the, like no matter what black does. And there's not really many forcing um lines. So if you just know the typical ideas, let's say with like knight e1, knight d3, and then like just expanding on the queen side with a4, a5, and just developing where normally, like white will always get a pleasant position here, and that's why I think this line is so good for white. Um, yeah. So thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. See you.